Hello, this is John Nix, and today I'm going to be doing a little tutorial here on modeling your voice. And to do this, you need Voce Vista, and you'll also need Madde, which can be downloaded. It's freeware. So first of all, the whole point of this, I guess, is for you to not only kind of explore the software, but really more importantly, to be able to have a model of your voice and then play around with certain aspects of it so that you can essentially hear maybe your voice in the future, or hear what it would sound like if you shaded vowels in a certain way. At any rate, so let's get started. So first things first, we're going to be using Voce Vista and using the vocal fry method to determine formant frequencies. And we'll also use the same method that I demonstrated on a previous video for how to measure the vibrato characteristics that we're going to be putting into Madde. So first of all, we'll do the vibrato part because that requires a sustained vowel. So I'm going to choose the ah vowel, and I'm going to do it on C4, middle C. Okay, so and so as we showed on the video the other day, we want to go to the start of voicing, and you can see there 8413 milliseconds. So that's really, it's showing that from the beginning of what is displayed to here is, or the running time is basically 8.4 seconds. So that's where we had voice onset. We're going to go in half a second, so 500 milliseconds, so about 88. There we go. Okay, and you may remember the maneuver is to do Control, Shift, and then you click and drag. And now that gives us kind of a highlighted part of the spectrogram here. And we want to go to the highest harmonic that we can easily get around. I think I can get around this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this will be the 5th harmonic. And so I'm just taking my mouse and I'm making a little box around that harmonic, the 5th harmonic. So you remember this is the fundamental, so that's the written pitch, and then this is an octave above, an octave and a 5th above, and then 2 octaves above, and then this is 2 octaves and a major 3rd above. All right, and we're going to plot that. And that was harmonic 5. This is Voce Vista 3.4.3, which has the more sophisticated vibrato measuring capabilities. Okay, so my mean vibrato rate is 4.8 hertz, and the extent is 186 cents, and we remember that that's like peak to bottom of each cycle. So we're really talking like 93 cents plus or minus. And then the vibrato jitter, 2%. And luckily for us, the kind of default jitter that you get on the Madde synthesizer is about 2%. Because it's really difficult to make the Madde synthesizer do very precise jitter things beyond that. Anyway, all right, so then we're going to plug that in over here. So again, we're modeling my voice, so I'm going to put in 4.8 right here where it says vibrato frequency in hertz, and so 4.8 times per second. And then amplitude in semitones. Well, we said it was 186 cents, okay, and or plus or minus 93 cents. So here, amplitude and semitones, we're going to put 0.93, okay, because 100 cents is 1 semitone. Okay, moving on, so we're just going to keep that there. Now we need to do some measurements of my formant frequencies while I sing the ah vowel. All right, so we're going to unfreeze this. Well, first of all, we need to actually do some resetting. Now I had this where, in fact, I can just play the file again, and it should play here in just a second. Nope, sorry, because I'd already hit reset. So at any rate, we'd had this set so that the power spectrum is updated every 100 milliseconds. That's one of the default settings in Voce Vista, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change that, so power spectrum average, and I'm going to move this way out to like 3,000 milliseconds. So instead of it updating the power spectrum kind of almost real time, instead it's going to be updated, it's going to be kind of averaging everything over a 3-second period. And it's going to look very, very different. The spectrum on the right-hand side is going to look very, very different. Okay, and we're still using just that spectrogram audio envelope power spectrum setting on the display. Okay, so here we have our spectrum, spectrogram, audio envelope. Okay, so now if I click run, you'll notice that rather than getting, you know, the quickly bouncing around spectrum that you might be familiar with seeing here, instead it moves much more slowly. And we use this when we're doing things with vocal fry. It enables us to kind of average things over a nice long time. Helps us highlight where the formants are, because when we have when we're singing, you know, there are spaces in between our harmonics, and a formant might lie in between one harmonic and the next, and we can see that both of them are getting boosted, but where the formant lies is still a little bit vague, and so by using vocal fry, we're able to see that a little better. Now, according to Donald Miller and Harm Schutte and colleagues that did the research on the accuracy of the vocal fry method of revealing formants, it's accurate within about 5 or 6%, and for the purposes of what we're doing, that's going to be just fine. There are certainly many other ways to find formant frequencies than using vocal fry, but it's fairly convenient and pretty speedy to do. So away we go. I'm going to sing the ah vowel, and then without moving my mouth, without changing my vocal tract shape, or as changing it as absolutely little as possible, I'm going to drop from singing in modal voice down into vocal fry, which is a very low frequency, aperiodic, that is, it's not a defined pitch, it's and that's going to help us reveal where the formant frequencies are. So here we go. And so by doing so, with it, with the longer power spectrum average, it enabled this to basically weed out where each harmonic was, and instead we're just getting those formant impulses, okay, where formant areas where the vocal tract is passing certain frequencies better than others. Let me do that again just to kind of highlight that. So the first second or two, while things are still settling down and it's averaging over a longer period of time, you'll see instead of individual spikes for the harmonics, they kind of go away, and instead you just see where these formant resonances are. So here we go again. Okay, so this down here is an artifact. We're not going to worry about that. that, however, is the formant peak for me singing an ah vowel at that pitch. And I'm just going to write this down, and we're going to also be doing some bandwidth measurements here in just a moment. So I'm just writing the center frequency of each formant peak down, because we're going to input those, and then we'll do our bandwidth measurements. So this is my third formant. So first, second, third, and F4 is here, and F5 is over there. I may do this one more time. I may drop into Fry one more time and see if I can get a little clearer idea of where that fifth formant is, because that's going to help with modeling my voice. So one more time. Yeah, in fact, we can see more clearly there's the fourth formant. It's a little bit lower that second time, so we're gonna kind of verify here. That one hasn't changed much. In fact, that's 686 hertz. That's the same place it was before. 1018, that's exactly where it was before. 2778, that's within just a couple of hertz of where we were before. So I'll go with that one. And then fourth formant is here. And then this is going to be 5. They kind of merged a little bit, but I think we can ballpark that we have a... It's going to be hard to do the formant bandwidth on those, but we'll do the best we can. And then this is fifth formant. And I believe out in here we probably have the sixth formant. I'm not quite sure about that little bump there. I'm going to kind of split the difference between that peak and say that this broader hump is the formant, and I'm going to try to find kind of the center of that. So 49, we'll just say 60. Okay, so now I have those frequencies, and let's put them in up here. So we're just typing them in, and then third formant is going to be here, 2778, 36. Sorry, nope, we don't need to be doing math. Let's try that again. Okay, 36, 53, 4107, 4960. Okay. So you might think, okay, well, how do we determine this bandwidth thing? Well, right now, this is showing the bandwidth here. So bandwidth, to give a definition, formants aren't just this single frequency here. They're really a range of frequencies that are passed well, and it's the formant peak is really defined by that central peak, which is at the highest intensity, and then going down 3 decibels on either side of that. So whatever frequencies are contained in that range, we're going to include then as the bandwidth of the formant. Okay, so in Madde, this Q factor here is what determines the bandwidth. And so right now we have the formant peak there, and the preset is a Q scaling of 10, which gives us, you can see that it's this number divided by 10, and we're going to actually have the actual bandwidths because we're going to measure them here on at least the first 4 formants. 5 and 6, I'm a little less. The first 3 formats. I'm a little hesitant to try to do the bandwidth on those because I don't believe I've got a fairly accurate read there. But I believe I can do it on these first 3. And that's going to make a difference in how it sounds subtly. We can listen to our handiwork so far here. So we have my formant frequencies in. We have my vibrato rate that we measured earlier, and the extent of my vibrato. And right now here on the source spectrum tilt, I've got it at -6. That's a fairly shallow slope. It's going to give a more buzzy, ringy sound. But anyway, we can kind of see. So let's play this back. Okay, and now in live. Okay, it's pretty close. It's pretty close. Not quite me, and so we can try a couple of things. Number one, we can deal here with the source spectrum, and we're also going to be doing those bandwidth adjustments. So just listen to what happens as I change basically the tilt on the spectrum. That is, how rapidly does it fall off in intensity as we go higher and higher in frequency. So this is at a 6 dB slope per octave. Now if I change it to 5, notice it starts to sound a little more ringy. That's at 4. Okay, so the lower that number, kind of the duller the sound is. So watch what happens if I take it down to, say, 12, okay, which is not uncommonly seen, okay? So you can hear it's not nearly as ringing a sound because the high frequencies are not nearly as strong. Now, what causes that ring in high frequencies? Well, typically when the vocal folds close very rapidly and that there's a fairly long closed phase, that's when we get more excitation of high frequencies. So there's greater high frequency energy when the vocal folds basically snap shut rapidly and the flow is cut off very rapidly. And then the closed phase is fairly lengthy. Now I'm 54 years old and I've been singing for a long time. And as a man, it's not uncommon that I would probably have a less steep spectral slope than -12. I'd probably have something on the order of maybe -6. So I'm going to adjust it here back up. Just listen to my voice again. Okay, I'm definitely not that dull sounding. Let's try 10. Okay, that's 10. Let's try 8. Getting better. Let's try 6. Okay, we're getting pretty close. So that's at -5. So that's a pretty shallow slope to the spectrum. All right, next, let's do something about this formant bandwidth because that's also going to affect things. In general, the narrower that these formant peaks are, generally you're going to get a more brilliant sound, provided that you've got harmonics close to those formants. But they're very precisely tuned, but that also means things that fall outside of the peak area are not going to get resonated nearly as well. So let's do those bandwidth measurements. So right here, again, we talked about 686 being the peak, And we're going to be looking at this number right here, which is telling us kind of a relative decibel measurement. So what we're looking for is at where it's going to be minus 45. So let's kind of scooch over. Okay, there's minus 45, and that was at 642 hertz. So that's kind of on the low side of our peak. And then on the high side, here's our peak again at 686. And again, we're keeping an eye on this and on this. So we just come over a bit. That's minus 41. That was actually maybe a little bit stronger. Okay, whoop, too far. And you just have to be very, very careful with moving your cursor. There we go. Okay, 730 on the high side. So, then we just subtract the upper number. We subtract the lower number from the upper number. So, 642 from 730. So, 88 hertz. So my bandwidth here for my first formant is a little bit wider than the Madde default setting. So I'm gonna set it to 9. Okay, that's still not enough. Notice this number went up. Let's go to 8. All right. So my bandwidth that we measured was 88 hertz, and again, you know, this is that central peak when we're looking on either side of that. And so what is the change in frequency from 3 dB below the peak on this side of the peak and 3 dB below on this side of the peak? 3 decibels, remember, is what we'd call kind of half power, and that is the that is kind of the definition of bandwidth of a formant peak. So we change that. That's a little truer representation of what my voice actually is. Right, now let's look at this one. This was our second formant peak here at 1018, and again we're going to do the same procedure. So we're at 1018 and we're looking, let's notice minus 49, so we're going to be looking for minus 52. So this was our central frequency. So we're going to be looking first on the low side of the peak. All right, so 974 on the low side. And then again finding that 3 decibels below. On this side. There we go, 1051. Okay. So once again, we just do some simple subtraction. 1051 minus the 974. And we get a bandwidth of 77 there. So this is going to be a little bit narrower. Now this one was wider than before, and now this one is going to be even narrower still. So instead, and we always get that error, I'm not quite sure why. So now let's try 11. Nope, we still need to go further. The joys of doing a live demo. Hey, good. That's pretty close. Okay, so again, just by changing this Q factor here, and again, it's the formant center frequency divided by this number is giving us a formant bandwidth value here. And so we measured mine at 88, so we got it about as close as we could go here. That's almost 86 hertz. And then we measured my second formant here at 77, and we've gotten this to 78. So that's pretty close. Let's do this next formant, which again is pretty clear. So the central frequency, when we measured it, we got 2776. I think I must have been in a hurry. I'm gonna I'm going to go with this. 2767. I'm going to correct that. And I'm going to correct that up here as well. Okay, so now, again, the default bandwidth is basically a 10% bandwidth, but we're going to get a better, more accurate measurement of that here. So, noticing when I'm at the center of the formant peak, this relative dB measurement here is minus 70. And we're watching here, so we're going to find, okay, well, where is 3 dB down from that? On the lower side. Whoop. So we want to go to 73. There it is. So on the low side, 2712, and then we're going to go across over here to minus 73. There we go. 2845. Okay. Generally, the bandwidth gets wider as you go higher in frequency. Okay, so here's 3. So this one is 133. So again, much narrower than the default setting. So I'm going to have to do some quick math here. And I'm going to need this to be about 20. Yep, let's try 21. Yeah, okay. So again, we're just taking that central formant frequency, and this Q factor basically divides it. So now we've made the first formant bandwidth in our Madde modeling wider, and then these two drastically narrower than the default settings. Now let's listen to the difference in how it sounds. I've not changed anything but those formant bandwidths. Let's give a listen. Okay, so far so good. I'm not going to attempt to do the bandwidth measurements here in the interest of time, because I want to show you a few other things. So far we used a sustained vowel, just kind of reviewing what we did. We did a sustained vowel to get the vibrato rate and extent measurements. And remembering in Voce Vista 3.4.3, the extent measurement is from the peak of the vibrato to the trough, and so we cut that value in half to put it in here, because Madde, when it's modeling, this is doing a plus minus, so plus and minus the central frequency. So we've got my rate and we've got my extent, and we just by listening, we kind of did some adjustments on how flat the spectrum was to kind of match the timbre of my voice. And then by doing vocal fry and getting the formant frequencies, we put them in up here. And then we also did bandwidth measurements on these formant peaks that were really clear. And we adjusted those settings right here as the Q factors. Again, essentially Madde is you've got a series of filters. So you've got a total sound source, and you're putting in various filters to that sound, and how wide or narrow a band that filter is selecting, we're adjusting that. And then how it's modulated, we're adjusting some here with the vibrato frequency and the amplitude. So, one other thing that we could do here, so we messed with the tilt of the spectrum. One of the practical things I think is saying, okay, now here's your voice now, and you take the measurements like we've done here, and then by using those, you've modeled the person's voice as it is now, and say, now, what would your voice sound like if your vibrato rate were a little faster? So we're going to change my vibrato rate up to 5.5, and we're going to narrow the amplitude of my vibrato a bit. So we're going to take it down. So now I have a little faster, narrower vibrato, which I would like. And I didn't sleep well last night, and maybe that's why my vibrato's a little slow today. We'll see. So here's what I would sound like if my vibrato was a little faster and the extent was a little narrower. Just by listening to that model, I'm actually making some adjustment there, because we tend to be really good mimics. We tend to entrain very easily with that stimulus like that. Okay, so now we've said, okay, now what would that be like? And the second thing you can do is making some subtle adjustments to formant frequencies. Here's an example. I had a student a couple of years ago, and we were working on Roger Quilter's Love's Philosophy, and there's the high A at the end of the song on the word thou, and I was wanting him to sing a little more thou, a little more in the vowel than he was doing, and he tended to want to sing and so we had all his formant frequency measurements. We had done them in a pedagogy class not that long before, and so we modeled him in Madde. It didn't take me but a minute just to plug in his formant numbers. I said, okay, now here's what you're doing on that high note, and let me move on up to the right pitch here. Yep, okay, so here's the high note. I mean, these are my formant frequencies, but sounds okay, but it's a little dull. It's not quite as exciting. And so I said, now, what would it sound like if we sang more And primary difference between the vowel and the vowel has a higher second formant. First formant's pretty close, generally, not too far apart. But the second formant on the vowel is a bit higher. So we just said, okay, well, let's raise that second formant about 300 hertz and see what it sounds like. And my student's eyes lit up, and he said, oh, you mean like, and he sang, and he responded to hearing himself, a model of himself, modeling that sound, and then he sang with it. And it was really quite surprising. He did a very good job. And I said, you just needed to get that in your ear to hear yourself doing that. He goes, yeah. So I'm going to put the original formant frequency in there again. This is mine understanding, not his, but it's a little more kind of an sound, actually. And now by raising that second formant about 300 hertz, and if we bump that a little more, not a bad sound for a high A. Okay, so that's just a little taste of using Voce Vista to measure some qualities in your voice, vibrato rate and vibrato extent, and then using Voce Vista and taking some measurements using vocal fry to get formant frequencies as well as the formant bandwidth, and then plugging all that information into Madde and building a model of your own voice. And then that enables you to do some experimenting. Okay, what would it sound like if I sang that vowel slightly more closed or more open, or if my vibrato was a little narrower or wider. It enables you to kind of hear some possibilities for your voice, and the computer is kind of helping you model for yourself so you can kind of hear what that would be like. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you ever have any questions about this procedure, please write me John Nix, so it's john.nix at utsa.edu. You can see in the lower right-hand part of the screen, that's where I teach currently. And my office phone is 210-458-5678. I'd be happy to correspond with you or talk with you on a phone to help you use some of these tools better in your pedagogy teaching and in your studio teaching. All right. Thanks a lot.